So we are going to talk about kitten care in the shelter today, and just wanted to be sure that we recognize and thank our amazing supporters for this webinar series. This is a 5-part series where we're talking all things kitten, and it's really become an amazing set of webinars, and I'm so glad that we were able to do it and participate in it, and that's thanks to Maddie's fund and the lovely Million Cat Challenge folks, and our great sponsor, Royal Canin. They make some amazing foods, and I love their kitten food for baby cat is one of the best foods I've actually used. Kittens love the taste of it, and it's little small kibbles. So very good stuff. And they've also done this very cool thing where they're letting us give away these boxes to people who attend. So we're giving a set of 50 of these Take Your Cat to the Vet boxes. And we're going to have a lucky winner drawn during this webinar, and we will announce the winner at the very end. So first thing, I need to know who you are. Debs helps me to know who I'm talking to. So this is our first poll question. Who are you, and what is your primary role in the shelter or rescue that you work with? All right, so let's see. We've got 31% is the highest number, and it's shelter or rescue managers or directors. We've got 24% that are shelter or rescue staff, not medical. 16% vet techs assistants. 12% foster caregivers. That's very cool to have you guys here too. Volunteers, 10%. That's awesome. 5% pet owners, community members. Great. I mean, we all are pet owners, community members probably, but we're saying primary role. And then 2% ACOs, animal control officers. Nice. All right, you guys, thank you for playing along with that. I have one other question, and then we will move on to me talking and sharing some info. So poll question number 2 is, where do you work or volunteer? And it's kind of the type of agency that you're with. And let's see, what do our results show? Most of you guys are at a public or private shelter that has the animal control contract. So 58%. 27% at a private shelter, 11% foster home-based, and 5% in that other category. Super. That is really helpful for me, so thank you for that. So, welcome. Thank you for being here. Super excited to be talking to you guys today. I think this is going to be a great session for you guys who are live in person and for anybody watching this in the future. I just think that this series is going to be so helpful to people. The first part of today, I'm going to review what's been talked about the past 3 weeks in this webinar series, in case you didn't attend any of them, or in case you attended them like I did, but maybe weren't like totally able to catch everything in the moment because there was a lot of information. Then we're going to talk about kitten care, looking at resource limitations, priorities, and community life-saving concepts. Talk about our goals for kitten flow through the shelter, length of stay and impacts on life-saving, decide like how we decide which kittens stay in the shelter and how long. And then we're going to talk about kitten pathway planning and focus a little bit on some technology and advances in sheltering that can help us be more efficient. And we're going to talk about the basics of kitten care, what we need to do for those little guys. And we're going to finally end up talking about what age or weight is the right minimum for spay, neuter, and kittens and why, and best practices in pediatric spay, neuter. So let's get going. This is me. I've been a shelter vet for the better part of 20 years now. I started out with UC Davis when the program first started. I was one of the first 2 vets they ever hired to go work in shelters. And that was a long time ago, 2001. It was a big shelter and did a lot to get a foster program and spay, neuter in place. And since then, I've been at a newer shelter, or a newer for me shelter, that's a smaller one, about 4,500 intakes, and did the same kind of a retooling of how they dealt with kittens, starting a foster program, dealing with the spay neuter question, and getting that live release up to 96%. So let's look at what we talked about in week 1 of this series. So week 1 was Dr. Kate Hurley, and that is her on the left side of your screen, sporting her amazing pandemic fashion. Those are cat pants, in case you can't tell on your screen. And she and Hannah Shaw talked to us about the kitten challenge in this country and what kittens need from us and how to arrive at successful management strategies and what makes them successful, talking about our philosophy and our goals of how we deal with kittens, and really engaging our community. So it was an awesome session, and it was really fun to watch. And it was even better the second time when I watched it again. I got a lot more out of it. So one of the first things that we talked about in that session, or Kate talked about, and I've lived this, so I know, is in the distant past, our approach to cats, kitten shelters was that we just let people bring everything in, and we like encouraged them, and we made it so easy. You know, we had night drop, and we like no questions asked, and it was just super easy to bring animals to shelters, and people thought that that's the way they're supposed to do. We trained them to think that we were supposed to do. And even while we were taking them all in, we were euthanizing most of them in most shelters, right? And we didn't really tell people that. We didn't really say to people, oh yeah, go ahead and bring those kittens in. Great, they're so cute. 70% chance they're gonna be euthanized. 90% chance they're gonna be euthanized. Or bottle babies. Oh yeah, bring them in, okay, bye. Welcome right to euthanasia. Horrible, and we never told people. And we didn't wanna burden people, but I think now that we made a mistake. I think that we have learned some things, and we're going to talk about that today, that we probably should have talked and engaged and been honest and asked for help, and we didn't. And that's a lesson learned. In the more recent past, and honestly, that distant past is only 6 years ago for most shelters, and some are still in that space. In the recent past, we've had amazing breakthroughs. The Million Cat Challenge has been life-altering for kittens and cats in shelters and people who work in shelters and the public. And they've shown us these 5 initiatives of ways we can manage our facilities and our intakes and our outcomes. And it's really just been life-altering for many people and millions of animals. Literally more than 2 million cats have been saved due to that program. And it's an amazing program. Love it. More recently, and this is like what, this past 5-6 months of bizarre world that we're living in, we're not only thinking about the things that the Million Cat Challenge was putting forth, but we're thinking about everything. We're thinking about new ways of prioritizing, of using our resources, and doing what's best and safest and most equitable for everyone. And by everyone, I mean people, animals, and communities at large. And so that's where we're at right now. Excuse me. And it's not just about the pandemic, because what we're learning now is stuff that we can take forward and make things better for everyone. And so that's what's really important about this time in our history. And so, you know, what is the challenge that we're talking about? And it's cats and kittens coming into shelters and figuring out who really needs our help and how we can best help them so that we're doing what animal shelters were designed to do. Oh, and by the way, I didn't even say it, but on the left, that is actually how I'm used to seeing Kate these days, wearing her cat, Baldwin Parkey, or Pirate, on her head. So if you zoom with Kate, this is all we see these days. So what do adult cats need from us? This is something that Kate really delved into, right? If they're not sick or injured or at imminent risk, they actually don't need much from the shelter system, and they're almost better off not interacting with us. Historically, we haven't done them a ton of good. You know, one thing that we can help with, if we have the resources within our facility, is helping them with population control. So that's providing spay neuter, and then letting those cats who aren't sick or injured or at imminent risk go back where they came from, back to their return to field or to their outdoor home, as I like to call it. So this is kind of return to field or return to owner for those outdoor cats. And it stabilizes their populations. It gets them back to their owners. You know, almost every outdoor cat has somebody or multiple somebodies who consider themselves to be that cat's owner. And yet, those people don't often think of going to a shelter if they notice that cat is not been around for a few days. And that's if they even notice it, right? And so that's really important, is that those cats have a source of food, and often that involves a caretaker or more than one caretaker. And we have to consider those people as their owners. and getting them back out where they came from gets them back to those people. And what's really interesting about this is we've been talking a lot about access to care and equity, and this kind of program where we sterilize and put them back actually provides access to care for many of those owners who otherwise might not have the resources, time, money, knowledge about the offerings or the value of spay neuter. And so it really is this cool equity program as well. So she's talking about this that's what we can do for cats, and saying not only is it good for the adult cats, but it also helps us to kind of have an upstream approach to the kitten issue. Because it's one thing to keep taking in gobs of kittens and socializing them, feeding them, getting them up to weight, spaying and neutering them, giving them new homes. But if you don't ever look back and deal with where they're coming from, you will always be bailing out that same sinking kayak, let's say, since we're kayakers and SUPers around here. So the goal is to really target the cats who are producing the kittens if and when your resources allow. And your resources may not allow it, but if and when they do, that's going to be a good way to approach this problem. And so Kate came up with this super clever little 4-part approach to dealing with this kitten conundrum. And it's starting with thinking upstream, which is that spaying and neutering, saying no to false dichotomies, which we'll talk about, working in balance with capacity, and then also recognizing human emotions. And this is a 4-part strategy to really help us deal with the whole kitten issue. And when we're talking about the think upstream, there is justification for why this is a good way to deal with the problem of cats and deaths of cats. And this is just a little study that was done, and it's looking at the number of deaths of free-roaming cats. And so going down on this graph is good to have fewer deaths, and then the different strategies that could be employed and what their results were. And what you see is that the biggest winners of strategies for kittens, which are in blue, and adult cats, which are in red, is either to remove a high number of them, or better yet, to sterilize them at high numbers, or even low numbers is actually quite helpful too. So these are just reasons why that upstream approach really can help us long-term to help get to our goals. So that's the adult cats is what we talked about first in that week. And then the big question is, what do kittens need from animal shelters, right? Because they're different than cats, adult cats. They have different needs. They're in a different risk group. And so what they really need is smart decisions about which of them enter our shelters, when and how, with the goal of matching resources with the greatest need, while also providing appropriate outcomes. And then over time, build your capacity and resources so that you can address that upstream problem as much as possible and try and get your numbers of kittens coming in down. And so when we're thinking about like, okay, who should come into the shelter, right? Because this week was focused on intake decisions. Really what we might want to consider, given that resources are always limited, is focusing on kittens on an adoption pathway, unhealthy stray and free-roaming cats that need care, cruelty cases, and interventions for significant risk or nuisance, including things like owners who cannot keep their animals because there's a problem. And then the other ones, we'll have to consider whether or not we have additional resources to help them. But these are the ones that are kind of the biggest priority for most of us, because they are the ones who most need us to improve their outcome. As far as when they should come in, that's a big question. We really move towards thinking about the fact that we don't want to create orphans, right? We want to leave babies with their mom while trying to keep her safe where she is. Because pulling the kittens off and making them bottle babies is just not in anybody's best interest. And you have to go back and watch Kate's talk, but she tells this cool story about her finding a baby crow and relearning this lesson in the context of wildlife, even though she already knew this about kittens, okay? So it's very, very cool story. Go back and watch that. As far as when they should come in, we also have to make sure that we're balancing our shelter resources with those in the greatest need. So what resources do we have today, and which kittens who should come in have the greatest need versus which ones don't really need to come in today because they're okay where they are. And we also have to think on the other side of the equation is, can we provide an outcome for all these kittens we take in? So we have to think about all these things as we make our decisions and put together our policies and protocols. And during Kate's talk, she also had Hannah Shaw there. Hannah Shaw is our kitten lady. And this is a great resource that Hannah put together and that she shares on her kittenlady.org, I think, website. It's on there and we can share that link. But basically, this is a great PDF that you can print out and share. And it's meant to help members of the public make decisions when they find kittens based on the condition of the kittens, the age, the situation they're in, and their own ability or capacity to provide those kittens with care, and or a shelter's capacity to help them. And so let's just let Kate speak for herself for a second.
So we need to be able to triage what are the kittens that most need our help, and then align that with the capacity that we have to help. So we don't want to be helping kittens that are already doing pretty okay when we only have the capacity to help a very limited group of kittens. Then we got to build our capacity to help the kittens even that are pretty okay if we want to bring those also in under our tent. From a shelter's perspective, how many foster homes do you have? What capacity do you have to provide the really necessary, excellent double compartment housing that is required for healthy, safe care of cats in a shelter? Do you have the staff for care and management, both of cats that are in the shelter itself, but also in the foster care system that requires some attention? Do you have the medical and surgical capacity to meet the needs of all of those cats and kittens? And then do you have the outcome pathway? When that wave comes through and all those kittens are old enough, do you have the adoptive home so that they'll have the outcome that they deserve?
Okay, and so Kate showed us this great graphic of a way to visualize this, of trying to prioritize who comes into the shelter, depending on what your current state of resources are. And it's the sick and injured are the ones we really, really have to really think about as kind of a non-negotiable. Then the true orphans and dangerous situations. And then we have to really think about, can we take the socials with mom? Can we take the ferals with mom? So matching resources with true need. And then the third part of her solution, which is this replacing outdated false dichotomies with win-win solutions. It's a really important part. You know, we all kind of worry about and fret about these things that people say to us. You know, the kittens will die if they don't come in. You know, you can't turn them away, you open admissions. It's their only chance, it's their only chance to sterilize mom. You know, these kind of things where it's like, oh my God, if we don't do this, the earth is gonna just stop rotating. And the concept is to just really think about, okay, well, you know, there is something we can do. Even if we can't do exactly what you're hoping for based on our own resources, what we can do is offer you alternatives. Can you help provide mom with food, water, and shelter? You know, explaining our foster homes are full. Can you hang on to them? Can you care for them until they're weaned? So it's giving them other options and realizing that it's not completely black or white. There's other things we can try. So these are just some of the basic principles that we are considering when we make our intake decisions. Basically, underage kittens who are still nursing are better off with mom until they're weaned. Social cats and kittens are better off in homes than in cages. So that's a foster home or the real home or even their outdoor home. Unsocial cats are better off staying where they are with a little bit of help rather than coming into a shelter or a cage or even into a home if they're not used to that and that's not what they are comfortable with. And shelters are a place for us to triage those guys who really need us, the sick and the injured, the true orphans, and the other ones that are at imminent risk. And so it's just a way for us to really cement in our minds what we're looking for. And then there's this fourth part of the equation, which we can't forget, right? This is this human emotion component. And we have to remember, people want to do the right thing. They think coming to a shelter is the best thing because we've trained them to do that. And honestly, historically, we haven't been completely honest and forthright with them about our capacity in a lot of cases. And so the other good part of that is they think we're the experts, and we are, right? We know a lot about this stuff. So we need to tell them what our situation is, what's best for the animals and best for facilities and best for the community, and then give them options so that they can do what's best for the kittens. And engage them in helping to find those solutions. And so I just grabbed a little clip of Hannah because she said this so
The idea of telling somebody don't bring that kitten into the shelter right now is not saying don't do anything about it. It's saying let me help you figure out the right thing to do for this kitten. And honestly, most people just don't know. So I think that is the role of animal welfare professionals, is to know that you are the professional, you do know the right thing to do, and you can communicate that in a way that's compassionate, that does express that, like, you know, that emotional connection with the person. Wow, I love that you're trying to help this kitten so much. You know, actually what would really be helpful for this kitten is X, Y, and Z, and here's some resources I can give you to make that happen.
Awesome. So these guys did such a great presentation, and I was driving in to work today to set up for this presentation. And I don't drive a lot lately, which is a shame because I feel like I have some deep thoughts when I drive. And I just had this like revelation while I was driving. And what it is that it's not actually about us and about shelters. What the pandemic has really taught us is about the public. Members of the public will seek out, listen to, and trust experts in the field during a time of crisis. So with the pandemic, we have these medical experts that people are really wanting to hear from. And the expert's role is to continually seek out new information, test possible solutions, and then share their findings with the public. And so if we, as experts in our field, and the medical experts, are open and honest and take the time to really speak to people in our community, then we can engage them in helping find solutions, or at least mitigating harm, right? That's one of our big goals, is mitigate harm. So we need to tell them what we know based on our expertise, based on what we know today, what's the best thing. And if that gets updated, we will let you know that we have learned something new. We need to explain negative consequences that we're trying to avoid. And then we need to ask them to be a part of the solution, right? And this is what we're seeing in the pandemic. The experts come out, they say people are dying of COVID. Here's what I need you to do based on what I know. So at first they said, be 6 feet apart. Okay, we were 6 feet apart. Then they said, hey, you know what? You should wear a mask. So we said, okay, let's wear masks. And some points in there, they said, you know what? You got to stay at home. And we stayed at home. Like, that's just amazing that people asking us to mitigate harm and not just protect ourselves, but for a lot of us, it's about protecting other people. They told us what to do. They gave us steps and we did it. And we often did it even when it was like really difficult. It has not been fun to sit at home and wear masks and do all the things, but we've done it because the experts told us it was best to mitigate harm. And it's exactly what we do in shelters, right? We want to mitigate harm in shelters to animals. Okay, I was just checking the chat because I saw something about some people having fuzzy picture, and I didn't know if it was people's bandwidth or the way I'm screen sharing. So people pipe up if needed, and I'll try a different setting. So we ended up week 1 just really focusing on making smart decisions, being the experts, giving people guidance, making sure we're matching available resources with greatest need while providing appropriate outcomes, staying within our capacity, and maximizing community life saving. So it was an awesome week 1. If you didn't see it, or if you did see it and all of this is like, what, I missed some of that, go back, watch it again. It was very good. Week 2, we were talking about support for kittens in the field. Dr. Levy and a bunch of experts who came and talked to us about some great programs, and their objectives were to talk to us about identifying how some of our policies and protocols might be sabotaging our goals and kind of leaving us in that swimming upstream situation. Really trying to leverage your field officers and or your volunteers to better serve kittens outside of the shelter, so that you're conserving resources for the ones who are within the shelter system, and activating the community, engaging the community, getting them involved so that you can do right by kittens, increase your live release rate, and decrease how much money you're spending to do that, if possible, really unifying your message. And they shared some really cool software tools. I'm a nerd, so I really enjoyed that part personally. So one of the things they talked about is that we have had some messaging for a few years now about don't kidnap the kittens and wait until 8. So trying to keep kittens where they are or have finders foster them until they're old enough for us to try and put them up for adoption. But one of the things was that it's a nuanced conversation, right? It's not super cut and dry in every case. There are some kittens who need our help. And the pathways or options for the kittens are really going to be based on conversations and what we find when we see the kittens. And our goal is the same as Kate was talking about. Intake those who really need our help, ask finders or owners to help be part of the solution so that they can be engaged in what we're doing and not leave it all on the shelter, but actually become part of what we're doing. Being sure that we're allowing healthy cats and kittens to stay at or return to their original location, and making sure that as kittens do come into our facilities, we really try and get them out to foster right away. Oh, and I'm seeing one thing in the chat about pictures. The pictures are blurred on purpose because they're just background decoration. So as long as the words are clear enough for you, that's all we're hoping for.
Actually, Dr. Delany, we are hearing that the words are a little fuzzy. So
okay, let me try one other setting. Let me try this setting. Tell me if that setting's any better. Give it a second, just in case. Any better?
What do you think, guys? Is that better? Andy's saying, yes, it is. Much, says Karina.
Okay, cool.
You fixed it. Thank you, Dr. Delany. Appreciate it.
All right, note to people, don't ever use the optimized screen share settings. It's evil. Okay. The recording will be completely clear. So yay, you could potentially get to hear me twice. All right. So when we're talking about the support for kittens in the field, it does require resources, right, to have these conversations and support people, but it saves your resources on the other end because you're not feeding and cleaning as many animals sitting in your shelter, okay? So it is good, and it's about asking, helping, or allowing the community to step up and be part of the solution, providing them the support that they need. And what we've really been seeing the past 6 months is the pandemic has been this huge catalyst for change. And it's kind of sped along this transition to a more community-based approach to sheltering. So really thinking not us versus them, but hey, we're all in this together. What can we all do to do our part? And then on the shelter's end, making sure that we're providing care and placement for the babies as efficiently as possible. And the thing that's really important in doing this, as you take the animals out of your facility, you've really got to leverage technology and tools to make it doable. So some of the pandemic inspired or ignited programs that they talked about were things like rehoming for owners using programs like Home to Home or Rehome. Those are platforms that can help people rehome their own pets versus taking to the shelter. And supporting owners to keep their pets, safety net programs so that people who are contemplating or facing or worried about giving up their pets don't have to do that. And that's things like food, spay neuter, landlord assistance, things that help owners keep their pets. And part of what we've been doing as we were forced by the pandemic to try and get animals out of shelters and into foster homes is we're really diving deeper into what should stay on site and what should go to foster. And so all neonatal kittens that come into a shelter really should go right to foster. Kittens that are weaned but too small for adoption prep should go straight to foster. Adoption age really should flow right into spay neuter and then go up for adoption at the shelter, or better yet, go to foster and being adopted out directly from a foster home. And medical cases, ideally, we need to really rethink this, and instead of having medical wards and medical cages, try and really recruit and train foster homes to take on those cases so they too can go to foster. So get them out into foster, support those foster programs, shift where you're putting your resources so that you can do that efficiently. And then you need to really think about what's going to come back, when is it going to come back, and why. We've historically tended to have animals come back from foster for adoption, but we're seeing that our foster parents can do a great job of adopting them out directly. So the kittens can come back for spay neuter and then go to their new home directly from the foster home. And there are some different programs that utilize that model. And so they talked about some of these cool programs. Operation Catnip has a really great program where they support finders of kittens, providing them with resources and medical care. And then the foster parent finds them a new home by themselves, by and large, is what my understanding was. And that seems amazing. Greater Good has really stepped up, greatergood.org, and they've created a feline foster program to help fosters expand their network. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. And then a lot of facilities have found that you can actually do online adoptions and online meet and greets, virtual meet and greets, where foster parents can show a prospective adopter the animal in their own home. And they can be like, oh, look, there's the kitten, he's playing, and look, he's with my dog, and oh my gosh, it's so wonderful. It's a great way for people to see a foster animal in its real life setting. And then this is the nerd in me loving this. So Orange County Animal Services in Florida created this. Well, they created this version of a Wait Till 8 program, which is super automated and streamlined and uses really good tech tools to get people who find kittens to, first of all, understand that this shelter has resource limitations. And so they are educated through this program, and then they're given the option of surrendering the animal for impoundment anyway, or fostering it with the shelter support. And it uses some super cool tools. It uses JotForm on a website to gather the information. And then it shoots the information to a Trello board. And then there's these Zapier jobs that shoot things all over so that things happen. And it's amazing. And I have not worked with it before, but I did try it out. And here's just a super quick little video where we talk about it.
The enrollment is actually 98%. I know it's on one of these slides, but I'm just blown away by the enrollment rate. I think there's something about having to select, I decline and I wish to have the animals impounded, as opposed to I would like to participate in the program. That is shifting the burden entirely to the person. The fate of those kittens is no longer in the hands of animal services. It's in the hands of the person who brought them in. And truthfully, they do care. They've brought the kittens in.
Oh, sorry, this is my part. So that's, it shows you the information. You decline or you agree to foster the kitten. You put in a whole bunch of information about, a little bit about yourself and a bunch about the situation with the cats. And then the people in the intake staff talk to you, give you resources, and you get these emails in your inbox that tell you your next steps and share some information about how to take care of the kittens. And then what you submitted gets shot over into a Trello board, and it creates all these to-do items and reminders and different.
The fact that over 9 out of 10 kitten finders opt in and feel supported and confident enough is really transformational. In the end, 1/3 of the finders adopt their kitten, 1/3 find a home with their friends and family, and 1/3 actually are returned to the shelter to be adopted. So as it's a very powerful diversion, not just for the time that the kittens are being raised, but also in the end.
Okay, so that's just a super cool program. And the creator of that program has been willing to share all of their templates and information. And so check that out. There's other things you could do to do a similar program, but it's more the concept of automating, informing people, giving them options, and supporting them. And that's just awesome in this day and age. And then the last presenter, Dr. Heather Kennedy, talked about her Courageous Kittens program. And that's for when the finder can't foster them, and really focusing on trying to get found kittens into a trained foster home during the critical socialization period, in cases where they are going to end up in the shelter system anyway, and you're trying to help them become good adoption candidates. And we know the critical window for socialization in kittens is 2 to 7 weeks. And so our goal is to get them right as they're being weaned off of mama and still in that period, because that's when they're super like malleable and you can convince them to love you and love other humans. And so it's just a really nice program, and you can check that out at Kansas City Pet Project. So that was week 2. Week 2 was super, super amazing. So much information. Watch it again if that wasn't enough for you, or if you didn't watch it the first time. And then week 3, talking a lot about foster homes, fostering greatness with Dr. Sarah Paisano and pretty much every friend she has apparently, because she had a lot of people showing up to tell us about some great programs. And talking about the new model for animal sheltering. And the concept is moving away from a shelter-based to a community and foster-based animal welfare system. And this is like so awesome. I'm so excited that we're going to do this. And I know we can do it. I know that we can carry this forward and really revolutionize what animal sheltering is. To do this, though, we do have to level up our foster programs because a lot of us have been running pretty sparse on the foster program, and there's much more we could be doing. And again, we need to leverage technology to make it efficient. So their objectives, we're really talking about getting those foster programs leveled up, leveraging platforms, modernizing how you're doing things, using telemedicine to its full effect, saving time and money, and empowering your volunteers. And so they really delve farther into the greater good that was mentioned during week 2 briefly. And they had a representative from Greater Good who talked to us about their hashtag, Stay Home and Foster initiative. And at the start of the pandemic, they launched this great thing with 2 new platforms, Stay Home and Foster and Feline Foster. I think they were brand new. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but it seemed like they were pretty new or definitely expanded. And just since March, I think mid-March-ish, they've had 83,000 foster parents sign up to foster for their local facilities, right? And so they sign up on this national platform and then they foster for their local facilities. 25,000 kitten fosters, 15,000 adult cat fosters, and 3,500, greater than 3,500, willing to take cats with significant medical care needs. 47% of their signups were willing to foster medium or large breed dogs, right? So what they said is 20,000 of these people are what they're calling unicorns, willing to take bully breeds. And so like, what is a unicorn? And a unicorn, it's a mythical creature. We're not sure if they really exist. We hope they do. We would love to see one and ride one. But in this case, they're these mythical foster homes who will kind of take some of our more difficult to foster animals. And what they found were these true unicorns, 68% under age 34. So that's a great age. They're not, they've got the resources and the time and the energy. And 47% with no kids or other pets. And that's really good because that removes some of our own concerns about animals in homes, depending on the animal's behavior, temperament, and age. Not that other homes can't foster, but this is just that special group that it removes a lot of some people's concerns. And so she was really talking to us about the fact that maybe we're just not reaching some of these great foster homes and that we might want to really improve how we reach out into the community. One thing is making it a part of your daily operations. And she shared this cool resource from Maddie's fund that is the guiding principle of foster programs. And it's really all about making sure that your shelter or rescue is all about the fostering. It's not about putting animals in cages. It's all about the benefits of fostering and really taking advantage of that. She also said how important it is for us to remove barriers to fostering. Same as barriers to adoption, removing barriers to fostering. So all these things, reference checks, background checks, all these things that can be barriers and don't really serve a great purpose. If we can remove these, make things as easy as possible, we'll get more foster parents. So she also said we've got to just talk about fostering all the time and everywhere. Social media, press releases, in the shelter itself. Get the word out that that's what shelters do, is they put animals in foster homes. And then we had another tech type person talking, and this was the creator of Dubert online platform. Dubert was originally used to coordinate transportation for shelters and rescues, and then they acquired or somehow otherwise became the Foster Space platform. So Foster Space, powered by Dubert, is this new platform to help coordinate and automate shelter foster programs. And this is like one of the big hurdles in dealing with a foster program that's robust, is that it is hard to coordinate. So it helps you find a recruit, it helps you manage your fosters, communicate with them, and it's just very cool. So I just grabbed some screenshots. So this is just the basic thing. There's some tickets where people can submit a ticket. They have messages, current fosters, recruiting fosters. So just the different screens of the system and what they're trying to accomplish is really simplifying communications. So they have this way to recruit them. You can upload your list of animals. You can provide information on what the animal needs, and then you can push it right out to your social media. You can keep track of your current fosters and whether or not they currently have animals, what kind of animals they foster, texting them directly through this app versus like using your own personal cell phone. You can use the messages part to, again, do some great communications and texting without having to actually use your own cell phone. You use the platform on your computer. And then this cool ticket system where the fosters can be like, oh, I need cat litter, I need this, I need that, I need to make an appointment. So you can get these communications all in one place and make it available at any time without somebody necessarily sitting and answering a phone. You can send out announcements to your fosters about like an upcoming event, something else that's going on that they need to hear about. All of them are based on certain categories they're in based on tags. You can invite them to events, and they have their own dashboard for themselves on their side, the foster side, where they can get themselves in the system, see animals in their area who need fostering. It's just really cool. So this kind of thing is what's really going to help us to level up that fostering. Her next guest was Renee at the Fort Bend Animal Services, and he talked about they're a public shelter and how at the beginning of COVID and throughout COVID, they really had to rethink how to engage the community, how to communicate with the community, how to make things easier. So they've done home delivery of animals, curbside services. They really moved towards the foster-based model like we've been talking about. And they use their own ACOs officers for this kind of stuff. So a lot of shelters will use volunteers, which is great, but they actually had their officers out there doing these deliveries. And I think that's awesome. Laura then came on and she talked to us a little bit about their programs. You know, they'd had some foster, but not robust. They'd had a little bit of a safety net program. But with COVID, they realized, hey, fostering's the thing. And we were able to really increase the number of animals going into foster, which then freed resources on the shelter side because there wasn't as much feeding and cleaning. And they were able to level up their use of technology to make this go smoothly. So they started using a foster on, they used Greater Good. We've already talked about that system. They set up a foster on deck system, which is where people are ready and willing to foster the next animals that come in. They use the WAG walkers from the app, the people who do the dog walking for some of their animal deliveries. They got their COVID pages up to date. They started using Calendly, which is an online scheduling program, so they could schedule appointments for the public. They created closed Facebook groups so their foster parents could share photos and videos for them to market the animals. And they used the awesome Maddie's Pet Assistant app and platform as a way to support their foster parents. And Maddie's Pet Assistant, it's available for foster parents to use with shelters and adopters to get follow-up and guidance and advice post-adoption or while fostering about any concerns they have. And so it's just a really nice way to give information to people and support them in fostering. They also had a dedicated phone that they would pass around to support their fosters. I'm going to go one them better, and I would say instead of having an actual phone, you can get a virtual phone number and just schedule it to go to different people at different times of different days. And if they're okay with it, it can forward calls to their phone, and the person calling doesn't know exactly where the call is going to. They just know that it's being answered. And so that we have to hand around a phone. And they also moved to fosters doing their own adoption counseling and fosters going right into their new home from fostering after having their surgeries. Sarah was, I think, our last person that week. And she talked about how they really engaged the community. They really got all up into social media. They made it fun and exciting and had cute little sayings about their animals wanting to go to foster. And it really helped them to get the community on board, get people in there. They removed barriers so it was easier to foster. And then they really supported their foster parents. And they really have been amazed at how well it's worked for them. And they've cleared their kennels 4 or 5 times since the pandemic hit. So some great lessons that are going to impact what I want to talk about here for this last part, which is actually providing care to kittens in the shelter. And first, I just want to talk about what is capacity. Because I think in the olden days, we thought capacity was like, how many little cages do you have? And you can shove cats in there and call it good. But that is really not capacity. Capacity is this many pieces to a puzzle of all the different things you need to take an animal in, provide it with care, and get it to an appropriate outcome in a timely manner. So it's these pieces of the puzzle that all have to fit together for you to really say you have capacity. Intake conversation, intake care, appropriate housing, just double-sided compartments for cats at least, daily care, medical care, quiet time, enrichment socialization, spay, neuter, and an appropriate outcome in a timely manner. That's your capacity. It's not just how many cages. And our capacity is going to be determined by our resources. And our resources and our limitations are all these things: people, money, time, expertise, equipment, facilities, housing, energy, and having appropriate outcomes. And then there's other limitations that are imposed upon us at times, such as COVID, stay-at-home orders, natural disasters like fires. And so we all have resource limitations. You know, even if you're at a really nice, big, fancy shelter, you still have resource limitations. And you not only have them within your own place, because even if you're completely dialed in, you still want to be efficient in what you're doing, because anything extra you could have, you could use elsewhere. And so, you know, even if your own shelter is doing great and you don't feel limited, you really have to think about, is every animal in my community doing well? Is every pet owner or possible owner supported? Is every rescue or shelter in my community doing as well as I am? And what about in the town next door? And what about in the next county? And what about in the neighboring states? And so we all need to be efficient and not waste resources, because even if we personally feel like we're doing just great, we could probably reach out and help somebody, right? Because it's not just about you and your facility. We're all part of this bigger life-saving community. And until we're all maximizing our life-saving and our community support, we shouldn't be wasting any resources. So when we're looking at kittens in the shelter, our first step is who comes in, right? Do the orphans come in? Yeah, probably, right? Do the younger kittens up to the older kittens come in? Depending on your resources, depending on what's available in your capacity. Moms with newborns versus moms with weaning age kittens. Owner surrender cats versus feral cats, right? Who comes into the shelter, and then how long are they going to stay? And this comes back to this great little visual that Kate gave us of this kind of a bullseye concept of who should come in. But I think we forgot to mention that bullseye, it's a moving target, okay? Your resources are going to change, your capacity is going to change, and so it's a constant, not a battle, but it's a constant duty to match the resources with capacity. Day by day, week by week, month by month, season by season, year by year, okay? And that's our job. And in Kate's talk, she mentioned the superhighway. So like, what is this superhighway, right? And what it is, it's about pathway planning. Who comes in, when they come in, how long they stay, and how they leave. And so I like to think of it as a highway or a roadway. And you got all these cats over here on the left who kind of sort of want to come in. And then you've got the various places they could go. And then you've got coming into the shelter and the outcomes they might have from the shelter. And our challenge is to decide who gets on the highway and where they end up going. You know, do they get returned to field if they're a feral? Or even if they're not a feral, do they get back to the neighborhood where they were found once they've been altered? Do they come into the shelter and spend a lot of time getting veterinary care? Do they go right into adoption? Do they go right to foster, right to rescue, right to a barn home? What is their pathway? That's our highway. And you just got to really be thinking about this at all times. The decisions we make are going to have massive impacts on what resources we need, how we allocate them, what our life-saving capacity is in our own facility, and our resulting outcomes and live release rates. But even more importantly, our life-saving capacity in our whole community and the welfare of people and animals in our communities, even outside of the shelter's walls. So our goal is to match those resources with priorities and to know at one point, at any point in time, what resources you have available. You need to be able to know what you have so you know what you should prioritize, and you need to know what outcomes you have. all of this part, right? So you have to have a pathway plan for every intake. As each cat and kitten comes in, you need to have their plan. What do they need now? Where are you going to house them? Ideally in foster, but maybe they have to stay at the shelter. How long are they going to stay? What care do they need? When will they need that care? What's their outcome going to be, or most likely? How can we efficiently move them through the system, get them towards their outcome? And that's our goal, is efficiency, a short length of stay. And, we didn't used to be as dialed into this concept, but it's super important. This short length of stay has huge benefits. It's better for the kittens, right, medically and behaviorally, to not stay in a shelter system for very long. It's better for the shelter, fewer resources used. Better for the other animals, because then there's more resources for them. It's better for your life saving, because you can do more if you have those resources back. It's better for your staff, your volunteers, and your fosters if you're just being efficient and getting animals through. And it gives you more outreach opportunities if you have those resources available. So you can go out in the community to help people and animals who need your help and hopefully keep them out of your shelter. So how do we achieve a short length of stay, right? Got to know your capacity and grow it over time if that's one of your goals. You have to be rigorous, relentless, and efficient in your pathway planning before arrival and during the animal stay, including things like daily rounds and action steps to move animals through your system. And especially now, we need to be streamlined and use leverage technology to make things efficient as much as possible. And you've got to provide any care the animals need as efficiently and in a timely manner with no delays, no extra days wasted. Kate just texted me on my watch. It's just distracting, but yeah, I love it too. She loves the new superhighway. Me too. Okay, Kitten Care and by the way, I'm trying not to check my phone because it's my birthday and I'm getting all these crazy birthday texts. So feel free to text me, but I'm trying not to check. Kitten Care in the shelter versus Kitten Care by the shelter, right? This is the where and the how of Kitten Care. And a lot of this is pandemic-inspired lessons that guide our new normal today and hopefully going forward. Our goal is that we learn and go forward to a better tomorrow. And so this is my dream, and I think it's many of our dreams, and it's deinstitutionalizing, decentralizing sheltering. So not gathering all of the cute little animals and putting them in little cages, getting them out, providing care, not in that setting. To do that, we've really got to prioritize. We've got to be efficient. We've got to use foster homes very well, public who find animals, as well as people that we bring into our fold and train up ourselves. We've got to communicate. We've got to be better about marketing, presenting ourselves, social media, all the things. We've got to make it easy and shape the path for people. Help people to do the right thing. Give them options, give them steps, and make it easy. We've got to be creative, like we're all learning about these creative solutions. And remember, just like today, virtual is almost as good as being there. So things like telemedicine, virtual adoptions, and virtual redemptions, these are our tools. And so why is this important? Why do we want to deinstitutionalize? It is probably obvious, but just in case we have to say it, shelters really aren't great places for animals to be in general. They are necessary at times, but our entire shelter medicine specialty and field was created because shelters are so challenging. Bringing animals and housing them in high density creates all kinds of problems. And these are some of those problems: infectious disease, stress, difficulty in providing nutrition and exercise, enrichment, hard to monitor, behavior problems are created. It's hard to get people to come in. All these things, because of the shelter environment, make it hard. And there's huge benefits for animals to not be in shelters, okay? They may seem obvious, hopefully, but it's the not shoving all those animals in one little space. Less disease exposure, less stress, better, environment as far as getting some sleep and getting exercise and getting enrichment and getting training, being watched and having the person know you and help you with whatever your needs are. And so there's huge benefits to us. So if we are successful and we can decentralize or deinstitutionalize sheltering, there still will be animals who need to go to shelters because they'll still need that kind of an environment and that kind of care and the people on site for at least limited periods of time, right? So who should be in the shelter going forward? Technology really gives us a lot of opportunities to connect owners with lost animals and adopters to see available animals. So that alleviates a little bit of a burden. Ideally, our goal is for animals to be on site for needed care and assessment only and as short as time as possible, and then go back to your original owner, back to your outdoor home, to your adopter as quickly as possible. And whenever possible, let's try and provide care to the animals in their foster homes using phone consultations, video consultations, telemedicine, whatever we need to do to keep those animals out of the shelter. And let's grow our foster programs for the medical animals so even they don't have to sit in the shelter just because they have URI or ringworm or whatever they have. Let's get them out also. So that's our goal. What do kittens need, right? This is about medical care, and all of this is about medical care, but this is the actual stuff as far as vaccines and stuff. So they need intake care. As they come in, immediately they need to be assessed on arrival or even pre-arrival, virtually over the phone or a Zoom call. Somebody's talking to about what they found. They need a medical assessment. They need their wellness care. They need any other medical care that becomes evident based on your exam. They need a behavioral assessment so you know what their behavioral needs are. And from day one, moment one, they need a pathway planned and their next steps scheduled, okay? So that's what they need when they first get into our system. Then they're gonna need their rechecks. You know, we usually do these about every 2 weeks, and that's things like checking their weight, making sure they're doing okay. Fosters can have a scale go home with them. They can check the weight at home. They can do telemedicine to let us know how the kittens are doing. They can show us a picture, show us a video, show us the kitten, right? We can use foster program mentors to help with some of this. We might even get little foster program mentors who drive around and go to the people's homes using appropriate PPE and check on the kittens and help them. What other care do they need? They need adoption preparation when it's time for that. And they need spay, neuter, microchipping, and that other stuff. And then they need to be adopted, if that's the pathway they're on, ideally directly from foster, on-site if needed, or through something creative like an off-site event or a pop-up event. And then post-adoption, they need to go right to their new home. And so the last part of our discussion is going to be focusing just a little bit on this spay-neuter question of when. When should we spay-neuter? So I'm going to ask you to please give me one more piece of information here. And that is, when does your shelter or rescue spay and neuter? What age or weight do you use as your minimum? And so your options are 1.5 pounds and robustly healthy, 2 pounds or 2.2 pounds is one option, 4 pounds, or you use an age instead of a weight, like greater than 4 months or 5 to 6 months, or does your facility wait until after the first heat cycle? Okay, so it looks like the majority of people are falling into using that 2 or 2.2 pounds minimum. So 71%. And then 14% are using a 4-pound minimum, and only 11% are using a 1.5 pound. 4% are using an age instead of a weight. All right, super interesting. So when we're talking about when is the right age to spay or neuter, there's a whole bunch of things that we want to consider. And the first part of that is kitten health and behavior needs. And when we look at kitten health and behavior, we have a couple of goals. Medically, we want them to be fully weaned, ready to be separated from mom, able to self-feed, healthy for surgery, and at no increased risk of morbidity, which is complications, or mortality, which is death. And behaviorally, we want them to have had some influence from their litter mates and mom if they were with them. And then we want them to be ready to integrate into a new home. And as they come into the new home, able to find their own food, water, and litter box, if you do the introduction right, and ready for some socialization and training to the extent that most people do that for kittens. And so when do they get to this stage? Weaning starts at 4 weeks. Most are fully weaned by 6 weeks. And what studies have shown is there's no increased risk of morbidity or mortality for kittens 6 to 8 weeks old having surgery. Behaviorally, when do they reach our goal? They get to that goal right around that 6 to 8 week mark also. And around this 6 and 7 week old mark, they're still in that critical socialization period. So overall, there's this kind of sweet spot at the age of 6 to 8 weeks where medically and behaviorally, they're good for surgery and best off to go to a new home and start acclimate to their new environment. So then the question is, okay, well, how much does a 6 to 8 week old kitten weigh? And the answer is that it would be rare for a kitten to get to 1.5 pounds without being at least 6 weeks old, if not 8 weeks old, right? A kitten who is 4 or 5 weeks old is not going to be 1.5 pounds unless it's got some kind of a growth hormone issue. So what's our surgery goal minimum weight and age? It's going to be 1.5 pounds minimum and at least 6 weeks old. And this is what we found is this kind of a sweet spot for when to do this. We've been recommending this here at our program for more than 10 years. I've been using it since my last shelter gig started in 2011. And we even use this cutoff for our senior vet students. And these are baby vets. They have probably done 1 or 2 surgeries before they come on our rotation, and they have never done surgery on a kitten. And we teach them these techniques at this weight, and they do amazing, which means that a real vet, no offense to them, but a more experienced vet can do these things easily. And the literature supports this. Spaying and neutering at 6 to 8 weeks was in ASV's 2016 guidelines, and even back in 2002. And then this, so my pandemic project more recently, is I'm reorganizing and I'm digitizing my historic VHS tapes. And I actually found this VHS tape, the case for early neutering, that I had for a long time. And basically it shows a lot of support for the 6 to 8 week mark. And when was this tape created? Freaking 1996, right? That's the year I started vet school. So this is nothing new. This is old news.
More and more shelters and veterinarians are embracing early spay-neuter as a tool to help control pet overpopulation. The issue of when to sterilize animals is obviously changing. Is it time to consider the case for early spay and neuter before pets are placed in adoptive homes at 6 to 8 weeks? Many shelters are deciding yes.
Okay, people. So this was groundbreaking news in 1996. This is 24 years later. This is not groundbreaking. So definitely that 6 to 8 week is the kind of sweet spot for spay neuter. And really that 1.5 minimum is when those kittens are going to be in that range. The more historic numbers, we're not sure exactly where they came from. 2 pounds is a nice round number. 2.2 pounds is a kilogram, so it makes drug calculations easier. 4 pounds is better for people who aren't comfortable with kittens at all. And the other ages are kind of historic on dog techniques because of vaccine series and exposure risk out in the public. So the numbers, historically, we're not sure what they were based on, but what we can say is the 6 to 8 weeks is well documented to be safe and appropriate. And it's really going to yield all kinds of benefits if you're not doing it to contemplate it, okay? So we're going to talk about the benefits and then some special precautions. So the benefits are, first of all, medically and behaviorally, it's a great idea. It gives them a shorter length of stay in the shelter and foster, and then you have fewer animals in your shelter, so less stress, disease, more resources are available, and you have more time, energy, and money for the animals who really need to be there versus the kittens who could have gone to their new homes. Decreases your workload, frees up your foster homes so they can foster other animals, and they get adopted very quickly at this 6 to 8 weeks old. They're so cute. A 10-week-old kitten is cute. A 6 to 8 week old kitten is even cuter, right? People cannot resist these little guys. They're little, they're cute, they're fluffy, their faces are round, and people just love them. So they fly off the shelf. So it really does end up being a huge win-win. As far as pathways, what it means is that if a kitten comes in and they're 1.5 pounds and healthy, they can go right to surgery and they can go right to their new home. And if they're less than 1.5 pounds or sick, they can go right to foster. And as soon as they get to 1.5 pounds and healthy, come in for surgery and adoption. So they can fly on through your system. So morbidity, mortality, we talked about that. Pre-operative concerns, they're really the same as any pediatric spay neuter. 2 pound, 3 pound, 4 pound. These are all the same concerns. It starts with picking good candidates. And so we're saying minimum 1.5 pounds and healthy. Then you have to do the same things as you would for any pediatric. You have to prevent hypothermia, prevent hypoglycemia, be careful about infectious disease protocols, and minimize their stress during the procedure. And these are just some fun things we can use to keep them warm. I'm not going to go into this a ton because I'm doing a whole hour on this topic in another month or so, and I just did an hour on this in the Kitten Coalition conference. So there's other material out there that goes into this deeper, but these are just the precautions you want to take for any pediatric, and they apply to the 1.5ers. When you're inducing, you need to use appropriate anesthesia and pain control, gentle handling, appropriate circuits, careful monitoring, watch that body heat, be efficient in your process, and keep them at the appropriate depth. It's nothing new and different. It's just the same stuff. Surgical technique is actually easier. It's easier to do these little guys because there's just less body fat. There's smaller blood vessels. It's a lot easier. So you just have to be an efficient surgeon and be gentle, and they do just great. Post-op, normal monitoring, keep them warm, feed them once they've recovered, because these guys, we do have that hypoglycemia concern. You know, we don't withhold food before surgery, and we feed them as soon as they're awake after surgery. And so when we kind of look overall at the pros and the cons of going for this weight and age, the pros are huge, all the things we talked about, and the cons are just minimal. You just have to try it and do it and make sure you're using good pediatric protocols, but you should be doing that anyway. And so the big picture is, this is the way that we can really expedite kittens getting to an appropriate outcome faster and free resources and capacity for animals that need us. So if you want to read more about that, there's a couple of articles out there, and I think we're going to throw the links up in there. And this is our final question, and then we are done, and I will wrap up a couple things and take some questions. So after my spiel, what do you think? Did I sell you? Would you try it? It's easy. I love it. So what do you think? Are you already doing it? Feel good? All in? You want to transition? Or do you think there's going to be buy-in concerns? And if so, who? Management, medical team, your fosters or doctors, volunteers, or you have your own concerns and you and I need to chat or go out for some virtual coffee or a virtual wine or whatever your virtual is. So let's see what you say. Buy-in concerns from medical team. People, come on, medical team, you can do this. You probably wouldn't even know. If I put a 1.5 pounder under your curtain instead of a 2 pounder, you probably wouldn't know. And if you're worried about intubating, let's talk during my next presentation that's an hour long. So 34% had buy-in concerns on the medical team side. 29% all in, want to transition. Awesome. 19% already doing it. 3% management, possible buy-in concerns. 10% fosters, adopters, volunteers, possible concerns. And 5% own personal concerns. So good. I'm glad that that information was helpful to you. And maybe some of you guys are considering this, because I do feel like it is the way to really maximize what you are doing out there. So I'm going to wrap up. I want to share a resource with you guys. So full disclosure, this was my pandemic project at work. We were going to revamp our online learning system for our boot camps, and the pandemic hit. And I fast-tracked this program to put up a bunch of COVID materials that people can take, little free courses. So please check it out if you're not already a member of it. It's the Shelter Med portal, and it's at sheltermedportal.com. It's also got some little news feed features and groups and discussions. And then we have a very robust calendar of learning events, online webinars, and conferences throughout the entire industry. And once you're a member, you can get a weekly newsletter where I send you a list of everything coming up in the next week so you don't miss anything fun. And once again, I want to say thank you to Royal Canin for their amazing sponsorship of this. And let's see who won the free boxes. Dun, 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 dun. Rebecca Barrow Clock. I'm going to say your name right. Anyway, Rebecca, you have a lovely name. It's a very difficult spelling. I bet people spell it wrong all the time. But You are one lucky person because you won the boxes and you're in Maui. Come on. Really? So anyway, so Rebecca, you're getting 50 of these lovely boxes from Royal Canin. So thank you again to Royal Canin. Thank you again, as always, to Maddie's Fund. Thank you, Maddie. And join us next week, same day, same time, same channel, for Dr. Paisano's second presentation on going home, getting those kittens into their permanent homes and being smart about it. And now we're going to do some questions if there are any. And if we don't get to your question, because yes, I was overambitious and I may have had too much material, you may always email me at my work email. And I'm super good most of the time at maintaining inbox zero and keeping on top of that. Okay, I'm going to stop share.
Okay, birthday girl, you made up with it for that curtain that just opened. What? You always have the things, but what was that?
That is a PowerPoint transition because I'm all about the PowerPoint styling.
Amazing. All right, we don't have much time, so we're jumping right in, although you used every minute wisely. Thank you so much for that great recap. Also, for folks who couldn't join the first three, that was a great summary. Very much appreciate that. So, utilizing foster homes to allow kittens more time with mom and litter mates. What do you think about that?
I think it totally depends on the situation. So if mom is safe where she is in her current home, like let's say she's with an owner, mama, keep babies and mom together until babies are 1.5 pounds and robustly healthy. Then babies go up for adoption, mom gets altered, everybody's happy. Mom's out in the field and you can keep her safe. I would do that. I would provide her with food, water, and shelter as needed without annoying her if she doesn't like you, because that's where she's going to be best off and her stress levels will be lowest, and that's going to be better for her and the babies, right? Mom's in danger somewhere, she can't stay there, there's a super huge dog coming to get her, whatever, then yes, I would probably keep mom with babies just until babies hit that 5-week mark and are weaning, and then I would separate the kids out, and I would, if they're unsocial mama, separate the kids out, love on those babies, make them as social as possible, move them on through, get mama altered and return to where she came from if it's safe for her without babies. And if not, I would find her a barn home if she's not going to be happy in somebody's home. And if it's a social mom with babies, everybody can stay together until everybody's ready for their surgeries.
Okay, but the follow-up question to that, what about the mental behavioral development? Aren't there benefits for kittens to stay longer with their mom and or their litter mates?
Yeah, I just covered all that. What? I just covered all that. I just said that. So I didn't separate mom from babies in any of those scenarios. In every single scenario, I kept mom with babies, either where they were in their owner's home, where they were in the field, or bringing mom and babies into an appropriate housing environment where they're safe until they could come off of her at about 5 or 6 weeks. So in none of those situations was my goal to orphan those babies if I could help it. And agreed, there are huge benefits to keeping babies with mom. Medical, behavioral, laziness on the foster parent side, babies with mom, almost no work. Orphans, oh my God, so much work. So yes, but we would try and keep mom in her actual normal location. And if we must bring her somewhere, try and minimize how long she's there and get her back where she should be as soon as possible.
I think the question wasn't necessarily taking kittens from mom, but those last 2 weeks. So if we're moving from 8 weeks to 6 weeks, what about those 2 weeks right there?
Oh, the taking babies from mom at 6 weeks instead of 8 weeks?
Right.
Oh, that's weaning age. That's when they're ready to go. At 6 weeks
They're
of
ready
age,
to go.
they are now just taking advantage of her, and their little teeth are sharp and her little mammaries are hurting. They are able to eat on their own, and they are still in their prime socialization window. They are ready to transition to what's going to be the rest of their lives. They're ready to go to a new home and see their new owners and furniture and vacuum cleaners. Like, they are ready and need that. So you're going to get your prime litter socialization up to about 5 to 6 weeks. And then they are ready, and they're at a great stage to experience those other things while their little minds are still super open to it and able to adjust easily without a lot of stress and panic. Sorry, I misunderstood a little bit, Randy.
That's okay. That was the answer that we were looking for then. So when we are
so old,
kittens,
my mind is foggy.
No, it's okay. Should we be microchipping them at the same time?
As surgery?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect.
You can do it when they're awake, but it's a pretty big needle and it's a little bit owie. I usually use fear-free techniques, and I'll give them some canned food or some cheese on a tongue depressor to distract them if I have to do it when they're awake. And it's not horrible, and they usually barely notice it, but it is a needle. And so I do it when they're asleep so that they don't even feel the needle go in. And then I can also watch the insertion site for any bleeding. Usually there's none, but occasionally there can be like a little bit, and so you have to put a little bit of pressure on it. So that surgery is a great time for that.
Okay. And can you remind us again about the students that you're teaching to do these surgeries? About how many students do you have and how successful are they?
So the current spay neuter rotation, it's a 2-week rotation at our local shelter, and we have 2 to 3 students on at a time, and they're working with our spay neuter instructor vet. And so you've got 2 or 3 students with one vet, and she is watching and instructing and helping each one with each surgery. And she's kind of, starting one on this easy surgery and then moving to this one. And so she's giving them a ton of attention and a ton of information, but they pick up these techniques so quickly. And actually, when you compare what we're asking to do to what they do in their surgery labs, in surgery labs, they do spays and neuters on shelter animals, but they're usually adult animals, and they usually use a very big incision, and there's all this guts and stuff that comes up in your way. It's really hard to do the surgery. So they come to us, and we tell them, you make this tiny little incision, and then you just fish out the uterus. And they're like, oh my God, that's so easy. And then you do a little self-tie, and you just like twirly the thing, and you cut the thing out. They love it. They learn it so fast, and it gives them so much confidence. It's an amazing program, and it's good for them, and it's good for animals because they go out into the world feeling like they can do pediatric and high volume spay neuter, and we need that.
We need that. Okay, so our next question is, this is my first year at a new shelter attempting to track kitten population in foster efficiently. We do basic rounds and exams for the kittens in shelter. I'm only contracted for 20 hours a week, and I'm primarily responsible for other shelter RVT duties. Is it okay that I'm spending up to 1 to 2 hours a week updating my foster kitten tracking spreadsheet? I know what you're going to say. Making sure we're following up on concerning medical cases and having routine contact with foster parents at least every 2 weeks. Trying to find the balance between nursing work and admin work with limited time. And in previous years, we've had issues with kittens crashing, are not thriving, and vet team is not alerted until the prognosis is very grave. I'd like to try and catch these sick kittens while they're on foster while it's still treatable. So about how much time should we be spending tracking, following up, and keeping an eye on these things?
I mean, it's going to be a chunk of time, and it's going to be necessary. But if you're efficient about it and you're using some of these great new tools, right? So the Dubert Foster Space tool, and that concept of communications through a centralized platform and having it be what we call asynchronous, which means you're not calling me and I'm picking up the phone right this second. You're sharing a message with me because it's not an exigent situation. You're sharing a message with me, and then when I have time, I can sit down and I can look at 20 different people's messages and be efficient in my responses. So that asynchronous component is very important. Having an efficient system is very important. And if you do it right, and you use these systems, and you use telemedicine, and you say, send me a picture, send me a video, let's get on a Zoom call and show it to me, you actually save a lot of time over what you would do otherwise. Otherwise, you might, in the olden days, and by olden days, I mean 6 months ago.
1996.
2020, January, you might have had kittens in foster, and the person might email with a question, and then you might call them, and then you might talk to your vet, and then you might find a time, and then they might come into the front office, and then they might call the tech, and the tech would go get the cat, and then you'd go to the vet, and you would do all these things. It would take a lot of time. that actually now we can really consolidate and get more bang for our buck. And so it's going to be more in foster, hopefully, but if we can be smart, we're going to be able to do it easily and still have time for the on-site kids who actually need eyes-on animal, hands-on care in the shelter. So it is doable. Technology is our friend. We've got to become comfortable and be smart and figure out our systems. Spend the time creating a system that works for you so that you can leverage it. Don't use a crappy system forever and be annoyed every day and waste an hour or two every day.
Right.
Make a good system, use a good system, and you'll get dividends every single day after that.
And Angie, Dr. Delany did a great recap of the Foster Space Dubert app. But if you missed last week, boy, make sure you swing back over and check that. It consolidates all of these things, addresses your question exactly. How can we text our fosters efficiently, open tickets, reply to them? It's all-in-one management that'll give you hopefully at least one of those hours back. Dr. Delany, what are your opinions on teaching medical care, fluids, tube feeding, etc., to fosters remotely?
I think it's doable. I think some of it is hands-on because you have to have the hand-eye, like what does it feel like? So I think there's ways to do it. I think you could do it. I think even better yet, if you could do something appropriately physically distant where you gather a few at a time and they're 10, 12 feet away, and you're showing them a technique and then having them do the technique. I think that's potentially more beneficial, but I bet you could do it remotely. I just haven't really thought about that yet too much, about like, what does it feel like when you pop through the skin with the needle to give the fluids and you're massaging the bubble, and it's just, I think you could do it. I mean, I know I do dog training online and the dog training instructors give me good feedback and I do the thing that's physically present. So I bet you could do it, but we'd have to really be clever and smart about it. But I do support teaching a lot of that basic medical care to your foster parents, or at least a subset who are going to do the more medically intensive cases. Teaching them to give fluids, tube feed, trickle feed, all the feeds, give vaccines, all the things, anything that we can teach them that a vet assistant might otherwise do, so a non-licensed physician. I would teach as many of my medical foster people as I could, and I would leverage foster mentors to be really good at those skills and potentially travel to different foster homes and do the thing or teach the thing one-on-one. Because I think that kind of leveraging of information and skills is going to really be good for us going forward.
I'm so sorry, I'm being asked. There is one last question, but I feel like you kind of addressed this already. But what are the behavioral implications for 6 to 8 week old kittens being placed in single cat or single pet homes? So not foster homes. So I did miss this question. Are there any behavioral implications for 6 to 8 week old kittens being placed in single cat or single pet homes?
No, 6 to 8 weeks is that window where we want to get them into their new home.
Right.
And so, they're going to be exposed, whatever their new home's going to be, and whatever the foster home is, could be the same. We don't know. So, it could be dogs, could be cats, could be kids, could be old people, could be people who talk loud, could be whatever. And so all the things they're ready to see when they're 6 to 8 weeks old. They've had their time with mom and their litter mates in an ideal world by that time, and they're ready to go forth and be fruitful in, not fruitful, but, successful.
Get a job.
Because I think that's what we, my bad. Go forth and be successful.
Do not be
in their permanent forever homes. Yes, 6 to 8 weeks. Get them to their new homes, whatever that may look like.
Thank you. Huge thank you to Royal Canin for making this series possible, and for Maddie's always for hosting us, even when we stay a couple minutes past our allotted time. Thank you, Maddie's. Thank you, Dr. Delany. I'd sing to you, but I can't. Bye, everybody.
Yeah, please don't. You already did once, and that was good. Thanks.